647 through and inclusive 651. Robert.
Yes, hello, Mr. Vendetta on board again. I spoke, or I had some questions regarding not so much the individual resolutions, but the resolutions that the town we've been passing considering the property cleanups. And please, I'm not here finger pointing or anything. I just want to bring this information to your attention. Actually, when I was questioning, when I took interest in it, I assumed that like the properties were owned and occupied, and the residents just refused to maintain the properties. I did a little bit of research into the properties, into some properties. Actually, if my count's correct, today would be, I think we'd be up to 45 cleaned up properties for the year, or at least 45 resolutions being passed for the year to clean up the properties. And we had our discussion last meeting. It was explained to me that the properties are reported to the town by various means. What I determined was I actually visited, I went back in chronological order, and I actually visited 10 of the most recent 10 of the properties, and I did a little deeper into the actual 3 that were approved at the last resolution. And from what I can understand is the town is becoming notified of a, for all intents and purposes, we're speaking about zombie properties. We're not talking about properties where people live and they just don't do it. We're talking about properties that are vacant, that the bank, that another misnomer, maybe I'm not saying it right, but just to be sure, zombie properties, like the zombie doesn't mean because the property's, you know, ugly to look at or falling down. It's because it's in the cracks. The people that lost the property have moved out, they're not living in it, and now the lending institution generally aren't maintaining them, and they're hoping that they get sold. But in the last couple of years, specifically since the increase in zombie properties with Hurricane Sandy, the governor and the attorney general have really been diligent in working to help municipalities in recovering the cost of cleaning up these properties. And they passed a law, I don't know if you're aware of it, it's the New York Real Property Actions and Proceeding, Article 13-1307. And what it does is, excuse me, I'm sorry, it places the burden of maintaining the properties on the lending institution immediately when the properties become vacant, not after years of litigation in court and they finally take possession of it. The governor has also started an industry best practice, which is, he's worked in hand with the Department of Financial Services, and there are a number of lending institutions which have signed on to this, where they admit that they take responsibility for cleaning up the properties. I actually have a copy of that best interest, if you would like a copy of it here. There's also been some information provided to municipalities by the state of New York, the state controller. And the synopsis of the state's report is that when local governments have taken legal action against those responsible for failing to maintain foreclosure properties, they have generally utilized local authority. Only 12% of the local officials indicated that they have taken legal action for Section 1307 violations, which is what we're speaking about, while 31% indicate they have taken legal actions against responsible parties for violations of a local law or ordinance. These findings suggest that while a large number of localities have not had to address foreclosure maintenance issues, the majority of localities that have done so have tended to use local procedures. Section 1307 appears to be an underused resource that will be helpful to those localities coping with foreclosure maintenance problems. Now, what I see that is going on, and I did a little bit more research on one specific property, and only because there was just more information to gather on it, and that's because that property is for sale right now. And what it looks like we're doing is, for instance, the property I'd like to speak about now is located at 35 Thurman Avenue in Hicksville, New York. It's section 12, block 199, lot 19. And back in April 1st, I would imagine somewhere prior to April 1st, the town was notified that the property was in, let's say, disarray. Now, I understand from my research, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it appears that when a property is reported as in disarray or derelict, the report ultimately makes its way to the Code Enforcement Division. The Code Enforcement, I would imagine, does an inspection. I know from personal experience that they have a code compliance inspector's report that each code compliance agent is supposed to fill out on every visit. So I would assume that the first visit would be an inspection of the property and then a determination whether or not the property is vacant or habitable. Then it looks like the town has two different notices of violations. One notice violation which I received where they handwrite, and it looks like there's a specific notice of violation that's designed for dealing with these zombie properties that's all pre-printed and everything. And it gets, it would then be affixed to served on the owner of the property. So in this particular property, 75 Thurman.
It's 75 or 35?
75, I'm sorry, Mr. Fernando, 75 Thurman. With this particular property, it looks, according to the resolution, it was cleaned up on April 3rd, 2015. And the town board passed a resolution last meeting, November 10th, to assess the cleanup costs against the property. So already there's a lapse where the money that's being used for the cleanup isn't immediately being readdressed. Now, once the money is assessed on the taxes, the town then has to wait for that piece of property to be sold, and then we recover our money. If the town, instead of immediately serving this notice on an unknown, I would assume that what's happening is the people aren't complying, the owners are being reached and they're not complying, but my point is that there might be a possibility that the town might have to clean the property up, but if we utilize section 1307, you would be immediately notifying the bank, okay, who has an interest in the property, that it's, number one, I think that we would get a lot of compliance, that the maintenance would be done, forthcoming before we had to go in there and do it. But then the town would be able to take legal action against that bank. And now, the New York State has actually set up a zombie home state registry. Okay, so what I believe should be happening is if somebody's making a complaint and the town is becoming aware that a property is now a zombie home, once the investigation starts, if it's determined, yes, this home is uninhabitable, it's a zombie home, I believe the town should be reporting this to the state registry. And also, quite frankly, besides just cleaning up the exterior of the property, from what I discovered, it almost looks like every property is like if you didn't walk up to the door, you would think people were living there. I think that ultimately we should be securing those properties, especially with the recent heroin scourge, to have like accessible properties in neighborhoods that don't stand out, that look like people live there. It might induce crime in some of these properties. Getting back to 75, I was able to do a little bit more research on this because this property is for sale. I was kind of shocked when I found out it was for sale. And I spoke with the realtor, and what I discovered was the owner of the property, his name is Anish Dalal. He's been in arrears on his taxes for at least 3 years with the town of Oyster Bay. It turns out in this particular case, the real estate agent is a personal acquaintance of the owner of the property. All right, I've spoken to him a number of times on the phone, and we have some recorded conversations with him. In particular to this property, the real estate agent explained to me that it was the bank that contacted the town to request that the property be cleaned up. I'm not saying it was or anything, I'm just conveying to you the information that I received. Now furthermore, in response to this property, it turns out that the owner of the property and the realtor belong to this Jain Samaj of Long Island. It's a tax-exempt organization under Section 501c3. And
Robert, what did it say again?
it's JAINSAMAJ of Long Island. I would assume that it's maybe a religious organization, that it's tax-free or some sort of, I don't know, tax-free foundation. There's not a lot of information on the company or the entity, but ironically, these individuals are also affiliated with Kamelsh Mehta, who I'm sure you know is, Mr. Mehta is associated with Mr. Singh's. He recently stepped down from his position. So, listen, I'm not saying, but I don't understand. Why would we be cleaning up this property if we are at a bank's request for an individual that doesn't pay his taxes and that's simply waiting for this property to sell? I'm sorry, I might be wrong, but from what I can understand, he was in arrear on his taxes, and it looks like we're just sitting back doing service for the bank, and somewhere down the road we'll get reimbursed with no interest, with no, no penalties or anything. I just think that it would be financially. I'm sorry, do you want to say something?
A few points. What happens with arrears is it goes to the county. The county makes the town whole. The town is not losing anything. The county has to collect the money.
You get interest on the late payment, like taxes.
We get that while we're in collection. Otherwise, the county is getting the interest on any late payment. If a property goes into arrears, it's the county's responsibility to collect the arrears. You have to remember, Nassau County is a special tax act county. It doesn't work the same way that other jurisdictions work in New York State.
So, I'm sorry, but are you saying that once we put this assessment against the property, the county immediately reimburses us?
No. What happens is, if the town gets called in, the town, through its mechanism, gets it put on the tax bill. The tax bill comes out, I send out the bills, I collect the payment. If the payment isn't made, when the tax collection warrant is closed, it's reported that the county is unpaid. The county then reimburses us for any money we didn't collect. And then they have the effective IOU that they have to collect on.
I'm sorry.
Which includes.
Could you just speculate from on the average, maybe, from the time that the resolution is, from the time that the cleanup is assessed, how long does it generally take for the town to be made solvent for the cost?
Well, once it goes on the tax collection warrants, it is approximately 1 year goes by.
So
If,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
if it isn't paid, many of these are paid. The banks will end up paying them because they don't want to have an open lien on that property, which could jeopardize their investment.
Which would be an excellent reason to use this law 1307 to go straight to the bank instead of.
Can that apply to Nassau County becomes the question, because the Nassau County structure is different.
Maybe we could look into it. Like I said, I want you to know about it.
Oh, you beat me to it, Rob. I confess, I'm not, you've done a lot of research, obviously. I'm not adverse in all of this as obviously you are, and certainly Jim is. There are also maybe a lot of practical considerations as to how all this works as well. I don't know if you want to add anything, Tom. But what I was going to suggest is using, what was the 75
75 Thurman Avenue.
Thurman. You said 35 at one time, I was looking sure.
I apologize. 75.
75. Well, whatever, let's go into some of these files and try to find out as a practical matter how it all works. Is the state legislation in effect?
Yes, but let me explain that.
Yeah.
Several years ago, while I was at P&D and Deputy Commissioner of CNI, I can speak to the procedure, but we amended Town Code, Chapter 135, 182 on property maintenance to make this more effective, so that when the NOV is served after 5 days, we have the ability to go in and perform the work and then put it on the tax bills, as Mr. Stephanie said. We can only serve a notice of violation or a summons on the owner of the property. So if the property went into default, we couldn't serve the bank because the bank wasn't the owner until the foreclosure action was concluded. The 13-1307 bid was make the banks liable from the time they obtained a judgment foreclosure, even before they obtained the deed. So it only becomes effective, the only help would be if a bank has already instituted a foreclosure action and has obtained a judgment of foreclosure, but hasn't had the sale on the steps of the courthouse, and they're not the owner yet.
So it's like a pre-sale device or?
Yes,
or
all
pre-foreclosure?
13.
The problem with that state provision then is you don't have anything against the owner, so
Correct.
you can't wind up bringing the money back from the owner.
Right, so with
That's why you
13,
have to go the route
right.
we're going.
With 13, well, we still do, with 13-1307 did, was make the plaintiff in a foreclosure action liable for property maintenance from the time they obtain a judgment foreclosure prior to the actual becoming the owner of record.
But it doesn't bring us back the money that it costs, right? You need the owner
Correct.
for that.
Correct. So we're aware of 13-1307, and we do avail ourselves of it, and what we've done from the time I was being here, I believe it's still done to this day, is before an NOV is served, determine if there's a mortgage on record, and then serve that bank with notice, because they want to know about the notice themselves, because the failure of the property maintenance is an event of default under the mortgage, which would accelerate their action.
I just wanted to point out,
It sounds like the distinction may be that you don't have the owner in that proceeding to recover the money from. I haven't looked at it.
you know, my point on that is that you're not recovering, the sad thing about this is, you're not recovering these fees from the owner anyway. What's happening is, the owner's gone, all right? The next person that buys the house that wants to buy into the community has got an additional, that's where it comes from. They have to,
Recover the expense from somewhere.
No, I understand that.
Doing the service, right?
I understand that.
But wouldn't that, hold on. We're all, everybody's speculating here. I'm admitting I don't know the process, I'm acknowledging it. And I think there are some practicalities here that, you know, I understand what everybody's saying, but in reality, it may not work that way. You have timing issues. The county has constraints. The state has rules. Everybody's got rules. All I'm saying is this. Let's also take a step back. I think Rob has raised an issue that we need to take a look at and find out exactly how it does work. As far as the last thing that was said about passing it on to a subsequent purchaser for value, I would think there'd be adjustments made at the closing of title that would
So the only point I'm trying to make is we can actually get the money back, I guess, from the county.
You got to step ahead of me. What I was going to say is this. We get a complaint, whether it's from a bank, whether it's from a resident, whether it's by observation of an elected official or a town employee, whatever. Our primary purpose is, number one, to cure the default. We don't want a rat-infested, raccoon-infested, or a house that becomes a drug den or, heaven forbid, whatever. So our job is twofold. Number one, to do the cleanup, and number two, get reimbursed for the cleanup. I'm not saying we want people to be treated inequitably, but I don't know that we, I'm looking at you, Jim, I don't know that we have a say in that process. Certainly we don't want to pass on to some purchaser for value or some innocent victim who actually did us a favor by buying the house and is now going to maintain it. But I don't know that we can, I don't know how much control we have over all these processes. So our job is twofold. Number one, cure the defect and get rid of the unsightly eyesore, potentially a dangerous threat to the public health, safety, and welfare. That's number one. Then number two, we need to get reimbursed. So why don't we go back and take a look at the process, also looking at it from the standpoint, 1307, did you say?
Yes, it's, I mean, Mr. Sabello is well versed. He knows what.
You made a comment earlier that it's being underutilized. Let's see if we're underutilized. Let's find out.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Bender.
Robert, thank you.